Alright, hey everyone! Welcome back to another wait. This isn't one of my weekly training videos, so you might be here for a different purpose. Anyways, so this video I wanted to go over some of the matchups that the Aramusha bulwark has that are kind of unique interactions. So that's going to be the main focus of this video, and I'm not really going to be touching on too much else. Do note that I won't be spending a lot of time on a lot of the characters. That's because most of the cast doesn't really have any unique interactions with Blade Blockade, either with their zone or otherwise. I was inspired to make this video just simply because I've always loved the Aramusha, and then additionally I've been watching some of the Blackprior Mythbuster videos recently that kind of inspired me to take a little bit of a deeper look in the training arena into what can be done. Now the training arena does have its limits, so not everything seen here will really work out perfectly for showing everything that Blade Blockade is capable of, or everything that it just doesn't work right against. Now, I'm not going to be discussing, of course, any bashes or any unblockable attacks at all for any reason, just because those unblockable attacks are, of course, going to go through the Blade Blockade, whether it's from or deflect or any other source. I am also going to be discussing just a few other things about Aramusha matchups, just because it's interesting. And with that, we'll get started right here with this Warden matchup. So what I was showing off here just a little bit ago is how there's enough pause time on an attack from the Aramusha on a whiff when an enemy dodges, that unless you attack with the light, the enemy you will not be able to Blade Blockade in response to an attack that comes out from the side. So of course, if you want to open people up, the only game open to the Aramusha right now is his feint game. Now on the Warden in particular, there's a unique thing because he can take a side dodge into his bash, during which you can chain either into a heavy or a light to cancel him out of it, though you'll still sometimes take the stamina hit. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the Centurion Zone. Interestingly enough, the Centurion Zone, you can get into your Blade Blockade whether you take the hits or not at any point during his zone. So that means even if you miss and you take the first hit, or you block the first hit, you are able to Blade Blockade the second hit and then carry on. If you do any side wanders, of course you're going to take some damage as you hyper armor through to get your unblockable hit off. If you do your top most of the time because of the speed of his attacks, you will always avoid damage from him. If you do ring the bell, of course, that's guaranteed, and the kick is guaranteed to break him out of his zone as well. Do note that if you do the Sidewinders heavies, there is a chance, if they are triggered on the second or third hit, that he can feint out and parry you in an actual fight. Alright, so next up we have the Conqueror Zone, which is a bit interesting because of its full block that accompanies it. So we're going to talk just very briefly about the Blade Blockade options that work and don't work. Obviously, Fury Unleashed from the top is unsuccessful because he maintains his block from the top while you're doing it. Your Sidewinders, though, are fairly safe, though keep in mind he can cancel out of it and then go into a parry. Your Ring the Bell is always going to be your safest option. With the Berserker, it's a little interesting because you cannot start up your Blade Blockade reliably after taking a hit, but sometimes, for some unknown reason, I don't know exactly why, it just lets you get the Blade Blockade up while you're taking a hit. Generally, the safest way to go about handling the Berserker, though, is to block a hit before attempting the Blade Blockade, so you get the window right. Additionally, if you learn to time the Blade Blockade perfectly in rhythm, you can straight block all 4 of his hits with it, just, for taunt value, kicks and giggles. It does take perfect timing, though. You cannot just press the button down once and then hold it for the entire duration. Now talking about the Highlander Zone. Again, as he carries through, he can feint out during it, but even so, you are able to Blade Blockade whether hit or not, despite the hit stun stagger, any amount of the hits in his zone. And similar to the Berserker, you can repeatedly Blade Blockade each just to fake your opponent out thinking you're doing something else, to see if you can bait out a parry attempt or some other attempt that might come defensively because you triggered your Blade Blockade. Now the Shaman is really unique when it comes to Blade Blockade and her interactions with her bleed in general. So when she feints her bleed, most of the time, surprisingly, whether you block or take the hit, you are able to block that follow-up bleed attack with your Blade Blockade. Interestingly enough, if she hits you with the unblockable, which I would think gives the most stagger time, you can Blade Blockade it if the follow-up bleed attack comes from that direction or from the top direction. But interestingly, when she throws it from the right or our left, from the video's perspective, it goes through most of the time before you can get Blade Blockade up. So there may be slightly different timings on the Shaman's bleed follow-up, and I think the one that comes out from her right guard stance is her safest, interestingly enough. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about her zone. The zone's really interesting. It works like the Berserker, but the rhythm is slightly different. Whereas the Berserker's is a steady 1-2, 1-2 the whole way through, the Shaman has 1-2 pause, then 1, you could say 1.5, because the fourth hit comes out very quickly afterwards. For this reason, what you just saw happen right there was me attempt to trigger on the third Blade Blockade twitch a Unleashed Fury or Sidewinder. It does the same thing regardless of which. Before the Hyper Armor kicks in, the final hit of the zone will knock you out of it. Therefore, if you're Blade Blockading anywhere other than the first hit of her zone, the only truly safe option is Ring the Bell, because otherwise the hit may go through anyways and hit you before your Hyper Armor kicks in, and your trade may not come out safely. The second hit is of course also safe for this, just because, well, you know, she has that little gap afterwards. I also wanted to include just this little segment just so I could point out a little bit about how stupid Blade Blockade ends up reacting in mirror fights against Aramusha. Generally speaking, the Aramusha that wins first in a mirror fight is the Aramusha that waits to Blade Blockade first when the other one tries to deadly feint. Blade Blockade ends up being a really annoying tool in any mirror matches because you both just end up doing the exact same thing forever. And of course, if you play Aramusha, you know that the only way to really deal with another Aramusha is to try to feint it out and then guard break them. Or actually, I think everyone knows this trick. You just guard break Aramushas. So finally, we're getting into the last two characters here that I wanted to talk a little bit about. The Zhang Jun. Of course, he has the really notorious fast lights after his attack that just for some reason, because of how slow his attack are hard for me and a lot of other people to properly parry. You can Blade Blockade them, but it's not safe to because he can feint the second attack into a guard break or just go into an unblockable. But his following through his dashing attack is really interesting and actually is something you can very safely Blade Blockade on. Because of its 2 hits, you're almost always able to get off a Blade Blockade and then kick him. So if you're an Aramusha and you're paired up against Zhang Jun, try to bait out this dashing attack because there's a lot of positive interactions that can occur as you either parry it just normally or as you deal with the 2 hits via your Blade Blockade. The final thing I wanted to touch on, and actually what kind of started this whole video, was the realization that the Black Prior can fast flow into his bulwark counter to counter Nuxia's deflects. I wanted to find out if the Aramusha could do this, and as you can see, he can't. He's not capable of it. The fast flow does not work appropriately because after one of his attacks, there's a long whiff time, whether it's deflected or not, before he can carry into his Blade Blockade. So this made me want to talk about just a few of the changes that I kind of want to see on the Aramusha. And of course, feel free to comment down below whether you agree with the ideas behind these changes or disagree with them. I'm really happy to have open discussion with either opinions on things, as these are just, you know, possible options. First off, I'd love to see him able to actually fast flow into his Blade Blockade. Second, I'd love to see a dodge attack that actually moved him nearly as fast as like the Tiandi's side dodge attack for just like, you know, an opener and an option to use against bashes. And fourth, he does kind of need an opener of some kind. There's a broad variety of different openers that might work for him. I'm not really sure which is best suited for him. Anyways, look forward to seeing you guys later this week for my typical weekly video that'll be coming out Thursday night. And with that, I'll just say, Vendel out.